So it turns out Mike Rowe and Dave Ramsey have been lying about welding, or at the very least, dramatically over exaggerating how much money you can make welding and what you can expect with that kind of career. So let's jump into it. I've been welding for 5 years. I classify myself as a mid-tier welder. I am not top of the food chain working on nuclear submarines or crazy exotic alloys, but I'm also not the worst. I'm one of the better guys in most shops. I know how to MIG, stick, and TIG weld fairly decently. I'll put up some pictures. I'm currently welding. I'm not a disgruntled ex-welder that's now, upset with how my life choices went. No, I'm just trying to give you a realistic expectation for what this job entails and what you can expect, because there is a lot of misinformation when it comes to welding. And let's jump into the big lie, which is the money. Anytime you talk about welding, or anytime welding is being promoted, all you hear about is 6-figure jobs, $100 an hour. We can't find any welders. This is crazy. And that is the big lie, is the money. So most welders do not make anywhere close to this. But I do want to talk about the welders that do, because there are some welders that really do make as much money as they say, but it's not nearly as romantic as it's being made out to be. So we're going to break that down. So for the most part, the people that make 6 figures welding are traveling, and they are traveling a lot. If you're somebody that likes to see your friends and family a lot, or your children, or fuck your girlfriend, good luck. If you're a traveling pipeliner, or you're going up to North Dakota for 4 or 5 months at a time, that's a tough break, man. It's a very tough life to live. It's pretty lonely, and all you hear about in these pipeliner welder circles, the people that do this, all they show are divorce memes and child support memes, because, yeah, believe it or not, those guys get divorced a lot, because of course they do. They're never home. So, yeah, not as romantic as it may seem. So another thing you need to consider is that a lot of these guys that are making that money, they're making, $150 or $150 an hour, doing crazy stuff. They're having to drive to these locations. There's a lot of hidden expenses. Gas in their truck. They got to pay for their truck, got to pay for their welder. They're their own company, so they don't have health insurance. They have to buy that outright. Then they have to buy liability insurance for the work they do. Then they're on the road, so they're eating out more. It's just an expensive lifestyle that many people don't really think about. They just see the amount per hour they get paid. They don't think about all the expenses. Don't get me wrong, the traveling welders and the pipeliners are making good money, but it's not all gravy. There are some serious downsides, especially when it comes to being away from friends and family and loved ones. That is just a tough break, man. It's a tough life to live. And for the most part, in my opinion, with those jobs, you are getting paid for the sacrifice you make to do all the traveling and then the welding. I think, honestly, I feel like you're getting paid for, like, 20% of what you're getting paid for is probably the welding, because a lot of the times the welding is not even that crazy. It's just that you got to find the guy that's going to go up to North Dakota to do it. Next thing we're going to talk about is underwater welding. Another thing, you cannot talk about welding with normies without them bringing up underwater welding. Now, again, I will say, these guys really do make that much money. It's a crazy bananas job, but they don't get paid enough. This is one of the most insane things. It's probably the most insane. I think it's literally the most dangerous job in the world. 15% of underwater welders die. Not 15% get hurt. Not 15% get injuries so grave that it changes their life forever. No, 15% just die outright. That's crazy. Second of all, when it comes to becoming an underwater welder, generally they take like a Navy scuba diver type and turn him into a welder. They don't really take a welder and train him up to do the scuba stuff. It's usually the other way around. But the underwater welding stuff is crazy. Yeah, they make good money, but also they have to go on an oil rig for like 6 months out of the year. It's, again, a very isolating way to live your life. And that's really what you're getting paid for, is the risking your life and isolation. Again, not so much the welding, but not to discredit them, but like underwater welding, you're getting paid to be the crazy person that does that stuff, because it's comical the amount of ways you can die underwater welding. You can catch on fire and burn alive underwater, get electrocuted, drown. Your body can just decompress. If they mess up the decompression chamber, you just die. Like, there are so many ways you can die. I'm amazed only 15% of people die. just because there's so many things that can go wrong. It's wild. Now let's talk about the money when it comes to the vast majority of welding jobs, which are going to be in a factory or in a shop of some kind. The number one thing that's going to dictate how much you get paid as a welder is where you're located, what state you're in, what country you're in. That's the number one thing. I think that means more than even the type of welding, just because the cost of living around the world varies so much. I'll use myself as an example. I live in Southwest Virginia. This is a low cost of living area. I can get a 1-bedroom apartment for $600 a month. That means that the welding jobs around here are going to pay like $18 to $24 an hour. Now, if I was making $18 to $24 an hour in Seattle, that would be like poverty. So it's not equivalent. So you need to really keep that in mind, where you're at in the country. Also, what country you're in. Reddit has a lot of welders from like Australia and Canada. And you'll see all these Australians talking about how much money they make. And they're making this many dollars per hour. And you're like, well, what? That's crazy. Why are they getting paid so much in Australia? And then you look at their currency and it's like, oh, their currency's fake. Their currency isn't worth anything. Same thing with Canada. You'll see these Red Seal welders in Canada making all this money, or at least you think they are. And then you do the currency conversion and they're like, oh, wait, their money's worth 25% less than ours. And then, oh, their housing, it's as expensive to live in Canada as it is in the Bay Area. And you're like, wait, are they actually making that much money? Oh, wait, maybe they're not really making that much money. So maybe it's not as great as it seems when people start comparing how much they make per hour. If you see a really high number, look into it a little more than just the surface level, because usually there's some more going on there. But the guys that are traveling generally do make more money. Yeah, they definitely make more money. But again, you have to factor in the other expenses and the general just lifestyle tax that traveling puts on you. For the most part, when it comes to welding jobs, the real money is in the overtime. Welding, in my opinion, is a job that pays an amount of money that is equivalent to a low to medium tier salary job. You make a decent salary as a welder, but you are paid hourly, which means that the second you go over 40 hours a week, you start making some money. Now, if you're making $24 an hour, you may not be super jazzed about that, depending on where you live, but when that 24 hours turns into $36 an hour at hour 41, you start feeling a little different. And welding, for the most part, is an hourly gig, and the money comes in the overtime. And usually when it comes to welding, when they need you, they need you. For the last 8 months, I have been working 50 to 60 hours a week. Could have worked more if I wanted to. And I've worked jobs where they literally tell me just, you can work as much as you want. Like, you can just come in whenever and work, and we will pay you. You could work 120 hours a week if you wanted to. And that's just how it is, because a lot of the times they just need that thing out the door that badly that they will pay you time and a half the whole time to do it. It's also some factories, like big corporations, sometimes have some really wild incentives. Some of these big factories never like to shut down, even on like Christmas, so they'll pay you like double time or triple time to work through a holiday. So that's where the money comes with welding, is a lot of times with overtime or just various incentives where whoever you're working for just needs you badly and they're willing to pay. Now let's do some pros and cons when it comes to welding. Let's start off with the pros. The number one thing that welding has going for it is that it takes little to no money to get started. Most people that know how to weld learned on the job. I went to school to learn. I spent $2,500 to learn how to weld. I learned how to do MIG, stick, and TIG at a community college. $2,500, and that was it. I also learned a little bit of metallurgy and blueprint reading. I got a lot of value out of my schooling for the amount of money I paid. I made it back in 3 weeks? 3 weeks. In a world with crazy amounts of student loan debt and just the amount of time it takes to go through college, there's something to be said about being able to get a decent job with no schooling or very little schooling and very little money down. That's huge. And if you are smart with your money, as a kid, when you first start welding, that will pay dividends. And we will get to that here in a minute. But another thing I really like about welding is that I can get a new job tomorrow. There are so many places looking for welders. Again, these may not be great jobs. These may not be whatever, but if I hate my job and I want to get another one, I can get it tomorrow. In fact, welders quit their jobs so often, there is a term for it. It's called dragging up. That's how frequently welders quit their jobs, because they know they can just get another job tomorrow, because they can, because it's hard to find good ones. And when I mean you can find a job fast, I mean fast. You click the send application button, and I've gotten calls within 10 minutes, or at the very longest, like 2 days. So I'm at the point to where if I see a welding job that looks good, I'll apply to that one job and just wait. I don't think anybody else could really employ that strategy of like, I'm just going to apply to one job and just see what happens. And a big reason I like this is that it gives me a lot of flexibility in my personal life. I'm somebody that's kind of crazy. I do this YouTube gaming thing. I've been doing it for over almost 15 years now. And I've done it full time off and on for 15 years. And when I get a bout of inspiration, or there's a new game that comes out, sometimes I like to just go all in and do it until I'm sick of it again. So that's why I like welding, is that if a new MMORPG comes out tomorrow and it's awesome and I want to just throw my life at it, I can, because I can just quit my job and play an MMO for a while, and when I get sick of it, I can just get another job. Like, that's what you can do as a welder. If you're halfway decent as a welder, you really do have that kind of freedom. If you're somewhat decent, and oh my God, if you can pass a drug test and you don't have a criminal background and you're a welder breathing, dude, you can get a job anywhere. It's wild. Another thing I like about welding is that you stay in shape. I'm somebody that used to work an office job, and I did gym bro workouts 4 to 5 times a week. Diet on point, sleep on point, doing everything I could to really maximize my physique at the time. And I'll tell you now, as somebody that welds 60 hours a week, I'm not in the gym at all anymore. I go very, very rarely, and I have maintained 80+% of my strength and gains. I've maintained it. And that's with no effort whatsoever going into the gym. I still try and eat somewhat decently and get my sleep, but I've managed to maintain what I have, and I'm actually stronger on some of my lifts, and some of the ones that I'm weaker on, like deadlift, that's more, central nervous system. I'm not going to get in the weeds on that, but you will stay in shape if you're welding, as long as you are halfway decent with your diet and you're just not a complete degenerate when it comes to sleep. You will get in shape. I mean, not that I'm slinging around hundreds of pounds of metal at a time, but, you're picking up something that weighs, 30, 40 pounds, for 10 hours, walking around in steel toe boots for 10 hours a day. Even if you're not picking up heavy stuff, you're just doing so much volume that you will get in shape. And if you're already in shape, then you're going to at least maintain a lot of it. So that's a nice little benefit. Another thing I really like, and this is something that's really almost exclusive to the trades, is that this is the last profession that is untouched by corporate HR and political correctness. Man, I have never laughed so hard than at a welding shop. I just hear the most absurd things from the most absurd people. The people in welding and manufacturing jobs are a different breed. I'm somebody that I'm kind of like boring. I'm very like intentional with a lot of my life decisions, and seeing people that are on the complete polar opposite of that and being around them is so fun and so entertaining. I work with a bunch of 50-plus-year-old children. It's hilarious. One of them will buy a motorcycle. They'll all buy motorcycles. Just childish shit like that. But love those guys to death. I honestly, without telling stories, it's just one of those things where if you know, you know. If you're going to be a welder or in any trade whatsoever, you need to have thick skin, because it's constant shit talk and constant everybody's giving each other a hard time, but in a good way, like in a I don't know. It's hard to explain, but if you know, you know. But the people I've met welding have been some of the biggest characters I've ever met in my life. So that's something that I enjoy, even if I hate the job itself and the company and the work. Usually the people are are just the best. It's the people watching is fantastic. And the final thing that's good about welding, and this is the most powerful thing when it comes to welding or really any trade, is that you can make a decent amount of money very young. Now, making money when you're young is extremely powerful when it comes to compounding interest. If you're a young kid with your head screwed on straight, which I know is a big ask, but they're out there. I was one of them. And I'll tell a story here in a second. You can really set yourself up to be very wealthy by the time you're in your 40s or 50s with just some discipline. Like, you don't even need to make that much money. So I'm going to tell you a story about a kid that I used to work with. This kid was 18 years old, working at a welding job like I was, making about 60, maybe $70,000 a year. Now, we were fucking working at this job, dude. We were working 60 hours plus a week every week. Like, this was that job. This was a job where they literally let us work as much as we wanted to. So this is a kid, 18 years old, making $60,000 to $70,000 a year. And we were talking about, they were talking about like what they were doing with their paychecks and whatever. And somebody asked me what I was doing with mine. I said, index funds, because I'm fucking boring. And he's asking me what that was. So I just gave him the whole speech about index funds and compounding interest and whatever. So this kid, not only, so this kid went from, I'm going to buy a truck. I'm going to buy a brand new truck so I can get a boat, because he liked to fish. Mexican kid liked to fish. This is what he was going to do with his money. He was going to buy a brand new truck so he could get a boat. And that was his game plan. I convinced him to start investing in the S&P 500. So this 18-year-old kid totally, and I mean good fucking dude, this kid is the shit, because like, man, he really went for it. He completely about-faced, kept his old Honda Civic, paid it off, owns his car outright, and put he has $100,000 in a mutual fund at age 21. He sent me a text message a few years later with $100,000 put away, and he's 21. Meanwhile, his peers are racking up student loan debt that they won't pay off until they're 40 or maybe ever. And he's $100,000 ahead. Now, that may not sound like a lot, but it's a lot, especially when you factor in a compounding, get on a compounding interest calculator. If this kid starts with $100,000 and just invests $10,000 a year for the next, 30 years, I'll put a compounding interest calculator up right now. Dude, like, he wins. Like, he just wins. And I told him all he's got to do now is just not get a girl pregnant. Don't get somebody you don't want pregnant. Like, that's all you got to do. And he wins. So that is, being able to make just a decent amount of money right off the start is so powerful. It's something that people do not realize, like, how big of a deal that is. Now, most people, unfortunately, that make money when they're younger just blow it. But if you don't, you can really put yourself in a good position. So, shout out to fucking Lewis, man. That dude's gonna have more money than all of us. So good for him. So yeah, even if he stays at that job and makes the equivalent of that amount of money year after year, dude, like, he's doing great. Now let's get into the cons. The big thing with welding is that welding is not a career. Welding, for the most part, is a series of jobs. There's not really a, like, ladder where you go from, like, this thing to this thing to this thing to this thing, and now you're at this thing. Welding is very much like, hey, there's a welding job here. Oh, it pays pretty good. Let's go do that. Job's over. We built the bridge. Whatever it was, that job's over. Now we're over and doing this thing and then that thing. And some jobs better than others, but that's usually how the welding world works. You don't really work your way up in the welding world, and then when you're in your 50s, you run the thing. Like, unless you own your own business, that's not really how it goes. With welding, the only real, like, career progression thing you can do is becoming a CWI, Certified Welding Inspector. That's the only real thing you can do. I personally am not going to do that because I'm not going to be welding a ton. Like, I'm not going to be welding that much longer to make that worthwhile, or that much longer consistently. We'll get into that here in a second. But that's the only real thing you can do. But you can, being a CWI is good. So that's the only real thing you can do. But if you are a CWI, you can make some money. So, yeah. The next downside when it comes to welding is that you need to have an exit strategy. You need to start thinking about getting out of welding while you're still doing it and while you still can do it, because you don't want to be that guy that's trapped. I have seen this happen before where it's like some guy in his 60s and he's welding because he blew all his money and now he's just got to be here and he's clearly just not up to shape to do the job and he's struggling and he's hurting. Now, I hate when people say that welding beats up your body because it's really not the welding that does it. It's the lifestyle and getting old. The main thing is that getting old sucks, and some people get older faster than others. I've worked with 55-year-olds that run circles around me, and I'm in pretty good shape. And I've worked with 24-year-olds that just can barely stand up straight because they are, chugging Monster energy drinks, smoking Marlboro Reds, and eating Sour Patch Kids, getting 3 hours of sleep a night. So if you take care of yourself and you get your diet on point, your sleep on point, and you just don't, you operate intelligently, you're probably going to be in better shape than the vast majority of the population. So when people say welding destroys your body, I will show you an office full of people that sit on their asses all day and are way more unhealthy than the people that have destroyed their bodies. So yeah, but this is a job. It's a physical job. So, maybe you have maybe your family has bad backs or, arthritis or whatever it may be. You need to understand that you just don't want to put yourself in a situation where you have to weld because, man, I see some of these guys that are just too old. They're just too old to be doing it, or they're too fucked up to be doing it, and you gotta have a way to get out. And the final thing is that sometimes you actually have to work. We fuck around a lot at work and we mess around and have a good time, but there are days where it's 100 degrees in the shop and we busted ass all day and you're sweaty and you're tired and you just, some days, man, you just physically work hard. Now, most days aren't too bad, but if you know, you know. Some days just suck and they really get that money out of you. So this is a job where you will be, physically challenged sometimes, and it's hot sometimes, man. It's just hot. But in a way that's kind of a pro. Sometimes, it's good to feel the cold weather and feel that heat and actually feel alive, because staying in a climate controlled office all day, I mean, I don't know. There's something to it. It's hard to explain. Doesn't sound like it, but man, it feels good. Catch that spark on your top of your head, and you're like, ooh, I'm alive now. I'm awake now. So, yeah. In conclusion, my overall thoughts on welding are, it's all right. It's not the worst, but it is certainly not what Mike Rowe and Dave Ramsey make it out to be. It's not like this money fountain that is just wild. It's not that at all. But there are a lot of upsides. Particularly if you're young. If you are young and you are disciplined and you have like a good head on your shoulders, there's some money to be made welding. And it's not so much the money you make welding, it's that you can start working when you're 18, making decent-ish money at 18. And if you're putting it away into the stock market and you're getting your money to start working for you at 18, dude, you can be very wealthy by the time you're in your 40s. So that's where the money, in my opinion, with welding is made, is if you can just make that money when you're young, dude. Man, that's the power. But other benefits I like that I don't give a shit about my job, dude. If they called me right now and said, oh, the place burned down, I wouldn't cry one bit. Dude, I wouldn't cry at all. I don't know. I'd probably enjoy the time off. Go find another job whenever I wanted to. Like, I like that I don't have to care. I like that I can, weld for a bit, and if I just don't feel like welding anymore, I'll just put in my 2 weeks, and hell, the same company will hire me right back whenever I want to come back. There's just a demand for that. There is a demand for just people that will do any sort of physical job. I'm optimistic about the future of welding and really any sort of blue collar, landscaping, whatever, any job that requires people to like physically work and actually physically work hard sometimes. I think there's a future for it because people are just getting fatter and lazier by the day, And I think that the job prospects for any of these jobs, especially, you know, welding where there's like a skill involved, or HVAC or whatever it is, any job that puts you in a physically uncomfortable environment, I think that the pay rate is going to just go up because there are so many fat, useless people in the world right now that just don't want to do it. So somebody's got to do it, and supply and demand, baby. So anyway, hope you guys found this video useful. I hope it gave you a more grounded reality of what the world of welding is like. Sorry for not posting too much on my YouTube channel. I've just been busy welding for like 50 to 60 hours a week, but I'll be back. You know, maybe Ashes of Creation won't suck, and I'll jump into that thing real hard. We'll see. But yeah, know what you think in the comments down below. Have a good one. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to subscribe with notifications on. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and join the Discord. It's free.